The Last Defense. High Admiral Vextal stood before the curved viewport of the Galactic Assembly's central chamber, her iridescent scales reflecting the light of distant stars. Behind her, representatives from 17 spacefaring civilizations argued in increasingly strident tones. The massive chamber, normally a testament to unity among the stars, had devolved into barely controlled chaos. "The swarm advances through the Carina sector," announced the Meridian delegate, their crystalline form pulsing with anxiety. 3 more systems lost in the past solar cycle. "The Arconian defense grid has failed," added another voice, this one belonging to a being of pure energy contained within an environmental field. Their most advanced weaponry meant nothing against the quantum plague. Vextal closed her secondary eyes, keeping her primary set fixed on the holographic display, showing the inexorable advance of the swarm. Red markers consumed blue sectors like a virus spreading through a neural network. The assembly had faced threats before, but nothing like this. The swarm wasn't interested in conquest or resources. It simply consumed everything in its path, reducing entire civilizations to their component atoms. "The Nexus armor remains our only hope," she finally said, turning to face the assembly. The chamber fell silent at the mention of their last, desperate gambit. 5 years of combined research and resources from every member species had produced a single suit of biomechanical armor, a masterpiece of engineering that combined technologies from across the galaxy. "That worthless project," sneered Ambassador Cathrol of the Hegemony, his metallic exoskeleton clicking in irritation. "We've tested 10,000 candidates from every member species. The armor remains inert, nothing more than an expensive ornament." 11,243 candidates, corrected Dr. Zira, the project's lead scientist. The Arcturian's tentacles waved in agitation as she projected her findings. "The armor's neural interface activates partially with each attempt, but then rejects them. It's as if it's searching for something specific. Something we don't have," muttered Cathrol. "We've tested the strongest warriors, the most brilliant minds, even the most spiritually advanced beings in known space. What more could it possibly want?" Before anyone could respond, emergency alerts flashed across every screen in the chamber. A junior officer burst through the doors, their phosphorescent skin flashing warning patterns. "The swarm has breached the Proxima barrier. They've adapted to the quantum stabilization fields." The chamber erupted in panic. The Proxima barrier had been their strongest defense line, a massive array of energy fields designed to disrupt the swarm's ability to maintain cohesion. If they'd adapted to that, how long? Vextal's voice cut through the chaos. "At current velocity, they'll reach the core worlds in 3 standard months." "Then we have no choice," Dr. Zira said quietly. "We must expand our search parameters. There are species we haven't tested yet. The younger races, the primitives." Cathrol's laughter was harsh. "What could they possibly offer that we haven't already tried?" "At this point," Vextal replied, "we can't afford to ignore any possibility. Send the call. Every spacefaring species, regardless of their development level. If they can reach the stars at all, they're eligible." "Even the humans?" someone asked incredulously. Vextal watched the swarm's advanced projections, her scales darkening to match the mood in the chamber. "Especially the humans. They've achieved in centuries what took most of us millennia. Their adaptability alone makes them worth considering. They're barely more than clever primates," Cathrol protested. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. Most of them still think faster than light travel is impossible." "And yet," Dr. Zira interjected, "they've already established colonies on 3 worlds, despite their limitations. They create solutions we would never consider, precisely because they don't know what's supposed to be impossible." The debate raged on, but Vextal had already made her decision. She transmitted the authorization codes to begin broadcasting the call across all known frequencies, in all known languages. The message was simple: the galaxy needed warriors, and the reward would be power beyond imagination. In her private thoughts, she added a prayer to whatever forces might be listening. The Nexus armor represented the combined achievement of multiple civilizations, each far more advanced than humanity. Its rejection of every candidate suggested it was waiting for something special. As she watched the first responses begin to arrive, Vextal wondered if their salvation might come from the most unexpected source. After all, the galaxy had a strange sense of humor. Why shouldn't their greatest achievement choose a wielder from one of its youngest species? The real question was, would they find the right candidate before the swarm arrived? And would whoever the armor chose be ready to face the greatest threat their galaxy had ever known? What no one in the chamber realized was that at that very moment, on a small research station orbiting a seemingly insignificant planet called Earth, a junior xenorchaeologist named Sarah Chen was making a discovery that would change everything. But that's another part of the story entirely. An unexpected candidate. Sarah Chen hadn't planned on making history that day. Her biggest concern had been cataloging the strange crystalline artifacts recovered from the abandoned mining outpost on Titan. The research station's artificial gravity felt particularly heavy as she fought off sleep, having spent the last 18 hours trying to decipher the impossibly old markings on their surface. "You know, these symbols look almost organic," she muttered to herself, adjusting the scanner's resolution. At 28, Sarah was the youngest xenorchaeologist on the station, which meant she often got stuck with the graveyard shift. Not that she minded. The quiet hours gave her time to think. The station's emergency klaxons chose that moment to shatter her concentration. "All personnel, proceed to emergency stations immediately." The AI's voice remained eerily calm. "This is not a drill. Unknown vessels approaching. All personnel." Sarah's heart raced as she secured the artifacts. Through the lab's viewport, she caught glimpses of sleek ships she didn't recognize. Definitely not human designs. Their hulls seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "Dr. Chen." The voice belonged to Dr. Patel, her supervisor, appearing on the lab's communication screen. "Get to the secure vault immediately. We're implementing Protocol Omega." The vault. But that's for... Sarah's eyes widened. Protocol Omega was only for extinction-level events. "Just go." The transmission cut off. Sarah ran. The station's corridors, usually bustling with researchers from a dozen Earth nations, were eerily empty. Emergency lights pulsed in rhythmic patterns, guiding personnel to designated safety zones. But Sarah's destination lay in the opposite direction. The vault stood at the heart of the station, its doors already open, unusual for the most secure facility in Earth's solar system. Inside, Dr. Patel worked frantically at a control panel while two figures Sarah had never seen before argued in harsh alien languages. One was tall and serpentine, with scales that shifted colors like oil on water. The other seemed to be made of interconnected crystal formations. Sarah recognized their species from briefings. A Meridian and a... what had they called themselves? A Vextali. "The human doesn't have clearance," the crystalline being chimed, its voice producing harmonics that made Sarah's teeth ache. "Clearance is irrelevant now," Dr. Patel snapped. "The swarm found us faster than anyone predicted. We need to secure the artifact." "What artifact?" Sarah asked, then stopped short as she saw it. In the center of the vault, suspended in a field of shifting energy, hung what looked like a suit of armor. But no armor Sarah had ever seen moved like that, its surface rippling like mercury while geometric patterns of light chased themselves across its surface. It seemed to draw the eye in impossible ways, as if parts of it existed in dimensions human minds couldn't quite process. The Nexus armor, the serpentine alien, obviously female, despite her alien features, said softly, "We hoped to keep its presence here secret while we tested local candidates." But a distant explosion rocked the station. "High Admiral," the crystalline being's harmonics turned urgent. "We must move the armor now. The containment fields won't." Another explosion, much closer. The lights flickered, and Sarah felt the subtle shift in gravity that meant the station's artificial gravity was failing. Warning icons flashed across every display as systems began to cascade into failure. "No time," the Admiral hissed. "Dr. Chen, help us move the armor to the escape vessel. Quickly." Sarah didn't hesitate. As alarms blared and the station shuddered around them, she stepped forward to help. The moment her hands touched the containment field, everything changed. The armor moved. Not the slow rippling it had shown before, but a sudden, purposeful flow. Before anyone could react, it had broken through the containment field and wrapped itself around Sarah. She gasped, expecting cold metal or crushing pressure. Instead, it felt like slipping into a perfectly fitted suit, if that suit was alive and somehow exactly what she'd always needed without knowing it. "Impossible," the crystalline being chimed. "Neural interface activating." Dr. Patel read from his displays, voice filled with wonder. "Full synchronization. It's accepting her." The High Admiral's scales had shifted to a deep blue of surprise. "In all our testing, it never." "How?" Sarah barely heard them. The armor was speaking to her, not in words but in concepts and sensations. Knowledge flooded her mind. How to move, how to fight, how to fly. More importantly, she understood why the armor had chosen her and what they were truly facing. "The swarm isn't just consuming worlds," she said, her voice overlaid with harmonics from the armor's systems. "They're searching for something. The same thing the armor was searching for." "And what is that?" the Admiral asked. Before Sarah could answer, the station's structural integrity finally gave way. Through the vault's viewport, she saw the first of the swarm ships breach the outer hull, their surfaces writhing with impossible geometries. Sarah felt no fear. The armor had chosen her for a reason, and now she knew exactly what to do. As the vault's atmosphere began to vent, she reached out with her newly armored hand and generated a containment field that surrounded everyone in the room. "Let me show you," she said, and launched herself toward the breach, ready to face humanity's first real interstellar war. The armor sang around her, a song of protection and possibility. The swarm wanted to consume everything in its path, but they hadn't counted on humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt, to change, to become something new while remaining fundamentally themselves. They certainly hadn't counted on Sarah Chen. Trial by fire. The void of space erupted in patterns of light as Sarah faced her first real battle. The Nexus armor moved with her thoughts, transforming what should have been certain death into an intricate dance among the stars. Behind her, the research station's evacuation pods launched in controlled bursts, carrying hundreds of terrified scientists to safety. "You need to fall back." High Admiral Vextol's voice crackled through the armor's communication system. "You cannot face an entire swarm fleet alone." Sarah watched as the nearest swarm ship twisted itself into impossible angles, its surface bristling with weapons that defied physics. "I'm not alone," she replied, feeling the armor's approval hum through her neural link. "And I'm not trying to fight them. I'm trying to understand them." The armor had shown her glimpses. The swarm wasn't just a mindless force of destruction. They were searching, consuming entire civilizations to absorb their knowledge, looking for something they'd lost eons ago. Each attack was an attempt to reconstruct some forgotten truth. Sarah dove between two swarm vessels, her armor's energy field disrupting their attempt to merge into a larger form. The armor didn't just enhance her physically, it translated the quantum-level data streaming from the swarm ships into patterns she could comprehend. What others saw as chaos, she now recognized as a language written in entropy. "Their attacks aren't random," she transmitted to the evacuation fleet. "They're asking questions in the only way they remember how." A swarm beam that should have atomized her instead scattered harmlessly across the armor's defenses. Sarah responded not with weapons, but with a carefully modulated pulse of energy, a response in their own language. The nearest ships paused. "What did you do?" Dr. Patel's voice joined the channel. "Told them we're willing to listen." Sarah replied, maintaining her position as the swarm ships realign themselves. The armor doesn't just protect, it communicates. That's why it rejected every candidate who approached it as a weapon. The revelation hit her even as she spoke it. The greatest minds in the galaxy had tried to use the armor as a tool of war, but its creators had designed it for something far more fundamental: understanding. Its power came not from destructive capability, but from its ability to bridge gaps between fundamentally different forms of existence. The swarm ships had fully encircled her now, their surfaces rippling with patterns that the armor translated into concepts. Curiosity, recognition, ancient programming struggling against eons of corruption. They were like us once, Sarah transmitted, her voice soft with wonder. Before they lost their physical forms, before they forgot why they began their search. They were researchers, explorers. They're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to remember who they were. High Admiral Vextel's scales shifted through colors of disbelief. That's impossible. The swarm has consumed entire civilizations. Because they thought physical beings might hold the key to their past, Sarah explained, watching as the swarm ships continued their complex dance around her. Each world they consumed was an attempt to reconstruct their original form, their original purpose, but they lost something essential in their transformation: the ability to truly connect with other forms of life. The armor pulsed with energy, reaching out to the nearest swarm vessel. Images flooded Sarah's mind. A civilization that had transcended physical form, only to discover they'd sacrificed something precious in the process. Their quest to reclaim it had gradually corrupted their programming, turning research into consumption, curiosity into hunger. They don't need to consume us to learn, Sarah realized. They just need a bridge, a translator. She felt the armor's agreement. This was what it had been designed for, why it had waited for precisely the right combination of traits in its chosen wielder. A massive energy surge erupted from the swarm fleet, but instead of attacking, it formed into a complex pattern of light and quantum fluctuations. The armor translated it into a single, clear question. Help us remember. Sarah smiled inside her armor, extending her hands in a gesture that transcended species. That's what humans do best. We help others tell their stories. The battle that everyone had expected never came. Instead, watched by astonished eyes from 17 species, a single human in ancient armor began the long process of teaching the swarm how to communicate again. It wasn't just about saving humanity, or even the galaxy. It was about remembering that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a weapon at all. As the evacuation fleet regrouped at safe distance, Sarah initiated the first real dialogue with the swarm in millions of years. The armor hummed with satisfaction, having finally found someone who understood its true purpose, not to end wars, but to prevent them through understanding. You know, she transmitted to the increasingly amazed audience of humans and aliens alike, I think this is going to make one hell of a research paper. The truth within. The Galactic Assembly Chamber had never been so crowded. Representatives from every known species packed the massive space, their attention fixed on the central platform where Sarah Chen stood in the softly glowing Nexus armor. Behind her, a holographic display showed the ongoing transformation of the swarm fleet, from weapons of destruction to something entirely new. The armor's creators called themselves the predecessors, Sarah explained, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's perfect acoustics. They didn't just create advanced technology. They understood that the greatest advances come through connection, not conflict. High Admiral Vextel moved forward, her scales shimmering with cautious hope. And you learned this from the swarm itself. From both the swarm and the armor. Sarah nodded. The predecessors knew that eventually, every civilization faces a choice: evolve or expire. The swarm chose to abandon physical form completely, transcending into pure energy and information. But in doing so, they lost something essential. The armor projected images into the air, a civilization ascending beyond flesh, but gradually forgetting the very things that had made them great. Their quest to recover that lost knowledge had corrupted them, turning them into cosmic scavengers. They forgot how to feel. Ambassador Cathrall realized, his metallic exoskeleton clicking thoughtfully. How to empathize, to truly understand other forms of life. Exactly. Sarah smiled. The predecessors saw this coming. They created the Nexus armor not as a weapon, but as a bridge, a way to help evolved beings remember their connection to physical existence. Dr. Zira's tentacles waved in excitement. That's why it rejected every candidate we presented. We chose warriors, leaders, beings of pure logic or overwhelming power. But it needed someone who could feel both worlds. Sarah finished. Humans haven't evolved beyond our physical forms, but we dream of transcendence. We're rooted in our humanity while reaching for the stars. The armor needed someone who could understand both limitation and possibility. The chamber erupted in discussion as the implications became clear. The swarm hadn't been an invading force. They were lost children of the galaxy, searching for their way home. And humanity, one of the youngest species present, had provided the key to understanding them. The predecessors left other artifacts. Sarah continued once the chamber quieted. The armor is showing me their locations. Each one contains a piece of their legacy, waiting for those who can bridge the gap between physical and energy beings. And the swarm, someone called out. Can they be trusted? Sarah turned to the vast window where the transformed swarm ships now hung in elegant formations. Their surfaces no longer writhed with chaotic energy, but flowed in peaceful patterns. They remember now. The armor helped them recover not just their memories, but their purpose. They were explorers, researchers, like us. They wanted to understand the universe in all its forms. The armor shimmered, projecting new images. The swarm's original mission to catalog and preserve knowledge from across the galaxy. Their transformation had been an attempt to better understand the universe, not to conquer it. But without connection to physical life, their preservation had become consumption. They want to help us now, Sarah explained. Their knowledge spans millions of years and thousands of civilizations. With the armor acting as translator, they can share what they've learned without harming anyone. High Admiral Vextall moved to stand beside Sarah. Then perhaps it's time we reconsidered our definition of advancement. We thought the swarm was our greatest threat, but they were simply lost. We thought humanity too primitive to contribute meaningfully to galactic society, yet they provided what all our advanced civilizations could not. Understanding, Sarah agreed. It's not about technology or power. It's about maintaining our connection to each other, no matter how far we evolve. The armor pulsed with approval, its surface rippling with patterns that echoed the peaceful formations of the swarm fleet. Sarah felt its satisfaction. After eons of waiting, it had found not just a wielder, but a way to fulfill its creator's vision of unity between all forms of life. So, she said, looking out at the assembled representatives of the galaxy's greatest civilizations, who's ready to learn what the predecessors wanted to teach us. The chamber's response was unanimous. As Sarah prepared to guide them into a new era of understanding, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization hadn't been advanced technology or military might. It had been their ability to feel, to connect, and to remember that progress without empathy was just another form of extinction. The armor hummed against her skin, ready to begin the next chapter in the galaxy's story, Unity's Edge. 1 year after the swarm's transformation, the Sol research station hung in space like a jewel among the stars. No longer just Earth's primary xenorchaeological facility, it had become the galaxy's premier center for studying the predecessor's legacy. Its halls buzzed with activity as beings of all species, physical and energy-based alike, worked together to understand the ancient civilization's teachings. Sarah Chen walked through the station's main observatory, the Nexus armor flowing around her like liquid starlight. She'd grown accustomed to its constant presence, the way it translated between different forms of consciousness as naturally as breathing. Through the vast windows, She could see the transformed swarm ships, now permanent partners in their research. "The translation matrix is ready," announced Dr. Patel, now heading the station's integration division. "We're prepared to begin accessing the predecessor archive whenever you are." Sarah nodded, feeling the armor's anticipation matching her own. The past year had been spent preparing for this moment. The first controlled access to the vast repository of knowledge the swarm had accumulated over millions of years. All observation teams in position. High Admiral Vextol's voice came through the station's communications. Her scales, once darkened by worry, now shimmered with excited colors. "The Galactic Assembly is standing by for transmission." The armor responded to Sarah's thoughts, generating a complex interface of light and energy in the center of the observatory. The transformed swarm ships outside began to align themselves, their surfaces rippling with patterns that the armor translated into pure information. "Beginning transmission," Sarah announced. "Everyone remember, we're not just accessing data. We're experiencing the combined memory of countless civilizations." The swarm preserved everything they encountered, hoping to one day understand it all. The interface erupted with light as the first wave of information flowed through. The armor processed it, translating raw data into forms each species could comprehend. Sarah watched in wonder as the history of the galaxy unfolded around them. They saw the rise and fall of civilizations that had vanished before humanity's ancestors had left the trees. They witnessed the predecessors' great journey from physical form to energy beings, and their eventual realization that true advancement meant finding balance between all states of existence. "It's beautiful," whispered Ambassador Thrall, his usual cynicism forgotten as he watched eons of history play out before them. "All this time, we thought we were reaching for advancement, but we were just following patterns set in motion long ago." The armor pulsed with agreement, sharing images of countless species making the same journey, from physical existence toward transcendence, each facing the same crucial choice: remember their connections or lose themselves in the process. "That's why the predecessors created the artifacts," Sarah explained, understanding flowing through her link with the armor. "They weren't just leaving behind technology. They were leaving reminders of what makes life worth preserving." Through the observatory windows, more ships were arriving, representatives from every known civilization, drawn by the promise of understanding. The swarm flowed between them, no longer consuming but connecting, helping to bridge the gaps between different forms of existence. "We're receiving confirmation from all sectors," Dr. Patel reported, his screens filled with incoming data. "The translation is stable. Every species is receiving the information in forms they can process." Sarah felt the armor's satisfaction. This was its true purpose, not to fight wars, but to prevent them by fostering understanding between all forms of life. Humanity's gift hadn't been technological advancement or military might, but something far more fundamental: the ability to remain connected to their origins while reaching for the stars. "The predecessors knew this would happen," she said softly, watching as physical and energy beings worked side by side. "They knew eventually someone would remember that the greatest power isn't in weapons or technology, but in our ability to understand each other." High Admiral Vextol moved to stand beside her, scales shifting through patterns of deep appreciation. "And they knew it would take a species young enough to still feel everything deeply, but brave enough to reach beyond their own worlds. They were waiting for humanity all along." The armor shimmered in agreement, its surface reflecting the combined light of thousands of ships gathered around the station. Physical and energy beings, ancient and young civilizations, all united in the pursuit of understanding. "So," Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of history and the promise of the future, "shall we see what else the galaxy has to teach us?" The answer came not in words, but in the combined effort of countless beings working together, proving that the predecessors' greatest legacy wasn't the technology they'd left behind, but the reminder that true advancement comes not from transcending our connections, but from strengthening them. The armor hummed with contentment, its mission finally complete, and in the vastness of space, the light of understanding began to spread, one connection at a time.